probably in May, I started a series of talks about living the law. And the purpose was for it to go along with our theme this year, which is living new thought through demonstration. So the first Sunday that I talked was about the law, living the law, and then I gave a two-part series on the law of attraction, and then I went to the next one, which was one talk on the law of thinking. And then things changed a bit, partly because the next weekend I was out of town with my two sons, which I'm going to talk about, and so Sandra Jean was here to speak. And then when I got back, it was Father's Day, so I gave a special talk for that, and then Mark talked, and then it was 4th of July. So a lot of different things happened. But here we are, back on track. We're going to talk about part 2 of the law of thinking. So let me remind you of part 1. Our open door into our freedom and understanding and the experience of the power of this law, that as we think, so our life becomes, is to begin to pay attention to what it is that we're thinking. And usually it's a mystery to us until we begin to notice that what we're thinking and what we're predominantly focused on begins to manifest and show itself in our everyday lives. So basically we only attract what we think, which goes along with what we feel. But we're talking about the law of thinking. To achieve success, we must think it. To work it, we must work it to make it happen. We must become it, be it, not worry about the doing. In advance, or to advance our lives, we must make some effort to rise up more in who we are. To obtain happiness, we must adapt our lives to the law of harmony and order. So that was a small aspect of what I said about part 1. But we have a lot of people in the world that probably don't understand this information that we're talking about. It may go contrary to what they think. And we may have family members ourselves who have some problems with this, which is what I'm going to talk about. So I have 3 sons, which I've talked about before. The oldest one has got my grandchildren in Phoenix. And then my middle son lives in Santa Barbara, California. And my youngest one's in Minnesota. And he and I have a great relationship. It's the other 2 that are difficult. My oldest one, when his mother and I divorced, and she got married a month after divorce, and took him away for 27 years. I didn't see him. And so she fed him a lot of negative stuff about me. And when he came back, I thought we'd have the opportunity to clear it all up, but he has not chosen to do that. He's still holding a lot of anger inside, so every time I go there, he's like distant. And it's difficult as a father to go, I love him, and I talk to him, but it doesn't go anywhere. And so I'm there mostly for my grandchildren. And so I call him Mark, he calls me George, and it's kind of weird sometimes because in April, how this whole thing started was in April I was there for my grandkids were in a play. And we dropped the children off at a play, and then he and I went to dinner, and I'm sitting across from the dinner table calling him Mark, which just felt, like, this is George, I'm speaking to you. And he talked about the fact he's done really well with taking care of his family with work. And he's been a principal of a school. He was through a private school and then 2 elementary schools, and now he's been the principal of a middle school. But he told me that he was going to quit because he'd been treated harshly by a lot of the parents at this school. And I said, well, you don't need to put up with that stuff, and maybe it's time to go somewhere that's more conducive to you. And he said, yes, I think I want to do that. And I said, Mark, I really feel like with the energy that's going on right now, that maybe you got to get clear about what it is that you want to do in your life. It may not be a principal at a school. You've done a good job, but maybe this is all coming out because it's time for something new. What do you want to do? I don't know. I said, okay, let me give you a couple of ideas to think about getting clear. And as I started telling him, he says, I've already tried them. They don't work. Okay. So I just let it go. So then in June, I went for my grandson's 12th birthday. Mark, I get there, and he's still he's even a little bit more distant and angry. And I got there Friday night. We watched the end of the basketball NBA championship games and played golf the next day in 106-degree weather, by the way, which was like, and after we couldn't even finish the course, it was so hot. So we got in the car, and as we're going back, I started to tell something to him about how it would all work out, because what had happened was he quit his job 2 weeks ahead of time, 2 weeks before. The principal job ended in June. And he thought that he would have another job right away. And he had applied for a couple of them, but they didn't come through. So he was all upset about the whole thing. And I said, Mark, just calm down and it'll all work out. You got to have some faith. He screamed at me. No, I'm so stupid. I quit my job and I didn't think of my family and I put them at risk and there's no money coming in. And I'm like, okay. So I went back to the house and took a nap. And when I got up, we went to go pick up the kids from their afternoon play to have some dinner with them. And on the way, I said, I want to talk with you about a couple of things. Would you please just listen to me? He said, okay. And he's a fundamentalist Christian, by the way, so he really believes in the Bible. So the first thing I said was, in the Bible it says, ask and you shall receive. And this is a really strong statement that I believe in. And I think that if you ask for what you want, you've got to stay open to receiving it and raise your vibration. Till if you have negative thoughts, it's not going to work. And I don't remember all I said. And then the second thing is the law of thinking, which I didn't say I'm talking at my church, but I am. And it says that we have to have positive thoughts about what we're wanting to create our lives. Whatever we think about, we create. And I explained some more of it, and I said, okay. He said, are you through? Though the first thing I want to say is that statement in the Bible is a bunch of crap. I don't understand why people say that because it's gone out, there's no backing to it, and on and on and on. And the second thing is your whole thing about the law of thinking and having positive thoughts is stupid either. It doesn't work. I tried it once and it didn't work. And I'm getting bombarded with this negativity. I'm like, oh my God. And so I just let it go. The next day was my grandson's birthday, and Mark is in this angry place, negative place where he's withdrawn. He's not talking even more so than he has in the past. And it was a difficult time being with him. I even went with his church, and interestingly enough, they're talking about love. And he's sitting there just carrying all this dark energy. And so celebrated my son's birthday, and apparently they put up with it, but he was just not talking and so forth. And so that ended that day. And the next morning before I left, I said to him, I want to tell you something about myself. When your mother and I were together, there were lots of times where I couldn't feel safe enough or didn't feel safe enough to share my feelings with her. I felt like I was in a prison, and it was because I was holding stuff back, and so I didn't talk a lot. And it made it difficult for her to understand who I was. It was difficult for me to understand who I was because I didn't feel safe. And I said it wasn't until I went through this program where I got in touch with my anger and released it from my body that I was able to express my feelings. So I would just like you to consider that. And I left to go to California. And I'm feeling the pain of all of this with my son as I leave to California. So I get to my middle one, who is not my biological son, but I've been his father since he was born. And he has issues with his mother as well. And his biological father, both of them, his biological father, all the times that I knew him when we were growing up, and it never had much to do with Christopher. And he was the kind of person who he was a fry cook, and he would always do the same thing. He'd try something different, and then he'd go back to being a fry cook because he didn't have the strength or energy to try something else. His mother, who I was married to for a while, was the same thing. She wanted to be an artist, and she'd try artwork, and then she'd give up and fail at it and so forth. And so over the last few weeks, I've been thinking about Christopher and his situation, which is he's a waiter at a restaurant. He's been doing it for years, and he'll have a job for a while as a waiter, and then he gets tired with it, and when he talks to me, he complains about the people in the job, and so he quits, and he goes and gets another waiter job. And he'll do that for a while, and then he quits, and he goes and gets another waiter job. And it's just like his biological parents who didn't really follow through with what they wanted. And so all this insight was coming to me that I wanted to talk and give him some tough love as his father, and showing, look, I've created 3 businesses. I'm the minister of a second church. There's all these things that I've done that you could follow through, not like your biological parents. Anyway, so I get there, and we have time with each other on Tuesday and Wednesday, Monday, Tuesday. And then so on Wednesday, I said, I'd like to talk with you. And he made it act as if I had to ask his permission, first of all, to talk with him. And I finally sat down and said all these things to him. And I told him what Mark had said, and he says, well, I believe what Mark said. It's all a bunch of crap, and I've tried it too, and positive thinking doesn't work. And in my talk with him, I said, I know I can help you. And his final statement was, you think you can help me? No, you can't help me. So I left on Friday. not feeling very good about the whole thing. And I started having doubt in my mind, like, God, this stuff I talk about, is it real? Maybe it's not real. Is this what most of the people in the world think? And there's a whole lot of doubt and upset going on, and I felt disconnected from my sons and from this. So I didn't have a very good Father's Day as a result of it, because I was really sad that both of these boys are in this same position. And it stuck with me for a number of days until I came here and I had some clients on Tuesday. And once I started letting God speak through me with my clients, I felt a lot better. And I'm going, okay, then maybe I just need to let them be who they are. But it is so painful to see my sons suffer as much as they are, when they could have it easier if they would just change their attitude. But they're carrying so much anger around. Christopher, I used to do a lot of work with. He knows the breath work and the energy work that I did, but he won't do it himself. And he used to be connected to spirituality, the science of mind. He's disconnected to it now. He's really unhappy. And so anyway, I finally got connected to my truth, and I realized that situations like this are an opportunity for us to see how strong we are in our own beliefs. Do I really let go of what I want because that's what they feel, or do I hold on to my belief and hold it space for them? Whether they grow into it or they don't grow into it, at this moment I cannot do much about it. And as a result, I want to live by this statement that came to me. And this is a statement for my family, my clients, and you, the congregation. And it says, just because the message may never be received does not mean it's not worth sending. So today, the message I'm sending, whether any of you receive it or not, is that we have this freedom within us. We have the power within us to create our lives. We can either create our lives out of upset and anger and pain, or we can create ourselves out of joy, love, freedom, and prosperity, and so forth. And so whenever we focus on that problem within and those issues within, it gets stronger. So for me, I'm here to grow my life even more, and that's what I want to help you to. So that's the message I want to give you for that part. To continue, let's look at part 2 of the law of thinking. Do you remember in the last lesson? Probably not, because it was some weeks ago. I talked about train tracks and how you look at the train tracks. It looks like the train is disappearing into one thing, right? And we know that that's not real. It's just an illusion. It's the same if you're on a dock somewhere and there's a ship there and it starts to go backwards. It looks like it's sinking into the water because of the depth of things. Again, that's an illusion. So when you're worried over some obstacle or problem, you want to remind yourself that it may purely be an illusion of the senses that's going on, and it's not real. It may be not true according to the law of what we're talking about. And did you know, beloveds, that you don't even see with your eyes? Your eyes are like a pair of windows. At the back of the eyes is a reflector. And this reflector in turn forms an image of what we see out there, and it sets up a wave current. And that wave current flows along the nerves in our body. And our body is the body of communication. So the nerves represent communication too. They speak to each other. They're the receptive reporters. And they relay the image that we see back to the brain. Now, in the brain, it's referred to as our memory center. And if the picture is a common one that we're used to, like how we see each of us all the time, then we recognize it and our memory accepts it readily. But if we're looking upon a new picture that comes to us, some new scene, our memory does not recognize it. And then we have to repeat it over and over again to make a lasting impression. So therefore, we don't really see things with our eyes, we see with our mind, which is our consciousness. And how we look at things. Our eyes are just what we look through. But how we see things in the world is based upon our consciousness, as the story I just gave to you. Both of my sons' consciousness is one of very low energy right now. So we have been programmed to see and to get the reflectors going on our memory. So how did we ever get it into our memory? Well, it started when we were kids. We were fresh and clean, right? We started looking at things from a new idea, a new place. But then we started hearing stuff from our parents who told us, don't do this, don't act like that. Why do you do this, etc. Our government said things, our church said things, our school said things. And we started taking all of that in. And they became our beliefs about life. So we had things that were programmed into our minds. And we grew up with that. And therefore, we have limitations in our minds because of them, because the program that we have has limitations. That's what we learned. Not unconditional love, but conditional love and limitations. So, we have to recognize, oh, pardon me. We have to recognize that through our own intellect, through our own thought, we have the ability to have thoughts of courage, of freedom, of possibility. We have to know that we have the wisdom to change our thinking about things and therefore change our life. With the power of this law of thinking, we begin to realize that what we're made of is so potent and strong within each of us, and yet we don't use it all. We use a small portion of it. We even have a statement back there that says something about we think we're very small in our lives, and we are, based upon all the stuff that we take on when we were children. And it's time to get all that out. It's time to release the past and the old beliefs that we grew up with, and recognize that there is a law of thinking that has this power within us, that we have power within us. And as we think in our heart, we create a life out there that could easily just be one of fulfillment, enrichment, and difference making, and therefore good, or we can make a life of littleness, struggle, and difficulty. Which do you choose? All along, we have the power to change the thinking that's within us. Now, I have been working on this in my own self, teaching it for quite a number of years, and I still say that I haven't learned, as serious as a student I am about it, or as you are, there's still a lot that I need to learn about this whole process. That I have to find areas in my life where I've blocked myself, where I'm not really totally believing it, where I feel less than, and I get caught up in that. I have to really understand this law more because it's a law of nature and it is powerful. And to know that I am the creator of my life. As we talked about last week, we had questions even about what God means and how does that mean in creation of our life. So, beloveds, we have all this power and this possibility and this promise in our life, and yet we lock them up inside and we don't let them out as much as we could. So, to help us along, we need to realize that we need to dedicate a certain part of our day to our own growth, to our own well-being. We need to start investing more time and money into ourselves, whether it's taking courses, reading books, meditating, listening to music, coming here, listening to these talks, etc. Really involve ourselves in it more and more so that we can find those areas where we feel stuck, where we're not expressing or not creating the life that we want to create. And then we have to move away also from the school model of education. The school model says what? If you read the book, remember it and repeat it, then you have it. But that's not necessarily true, right? We have a lot of brilliant people out there who are not getting good results in their life. We have brilliant people out in the world who are broke. We have brilliant people who are alone and lonely and don't even know that that's what's going on. So we have to understand the truth of what we're saying. That we are just messing around most of the time with little ideas of who we are. Smaller ideas of what we're really capable of doing. And so we have to expand our mind and we have to expand our thinking. I believe the first step towards accomplishing what I'm talking about is give to yourself first. And as I said before, we all have a block to giving to ourselves. First of all, as my one son said, he doesn't know what he wants. Most of us don't know what we want. And once we get a little bit clear of it, we still have other fears like, is it okay for me to have it? Or if I have my want from somebody, do I have to do something in return? Is there a liability around there? Is there something like this? So there's all these fears that we grew up with around asking for what we want. And yet here we are in our physical body and our soul, here to learn about our lives, to learn about our connection with God. So it's about giving to ourselves first and feeling that power inside that God is within us. And what this is, then we have to look at shifting our values to start looking at where am I still carrying around thoughts that I grew up with, that my church told me or that my parents told me or that somebody else told me that I've put as a belief that no longer works for me. Where can I let it go? Those are things that we have to start thinking about and not just go along yippity-doo in our lives with all these old thoughts still running us. This changing of our values is the development of ourself from a small s to a big S, which is God expressing through us. God as a self-love, as power, as health and well-being, whatever it is that we can express in our body. So talking about this law, what I'm saying to you, I can give you an example of Edison. To activate Edison's law, his thinking was a desire to create the first incandescent bulb. And he had no idea of how to do that. But he had a belief that the infinite had a solution, because you can't have a question without an answer, or a problem without a solution. And all the time it's a spiritual solution. We got to remember that. But he learned to do what people called Edison's catnaps. He would sit in a rocking chair and hold a rock in his hands in case he fell asleep. It would fall on the floor and waking him up. And then he went to what he called the land of solutions. And he practiced this law, thinking in such a way that he would go to that land of questions and listen. And ultimately generate enough ideas that when he woke up, what happened was he called enough forth to create the first incandescent bulb. And he named that lamp, the bulb, the Mazda lamp, after his teacher Mazda, who taught him this kind of meditating and quieting the mind and listening to the depth where the answers are found. That's really very important for us to go inside and give time to ourselves and just listen to the answers that God wants to give to us. Now, what I'm talking about is the difference between being aware of the law of thinking and knowing the law of thinking. Because sometimes you can say, I'm aware of it. There's a lot of people that can read the Bible to it, but do they know what it means? Or they can read this or anything else, but they don't have a real sense of it, of knowing what does it mean. And that's what we're thinking about here. Many people in our life are brilliant, but they're still living small lives, living a pygmy version of what they could actually do that. So to create this law of thinking, to bring it from thinking about it to knowing it, is what this series is about. It is possible to change thinking. And I think our educational system makes a problem out of it, because they don't teach thinking in school. And yet, do we think we can teach thinking? Of course. Just like math or history or anything else, you could teach people how to think better and not just go on all day long with all this crap that keeps going on in our minds and all the judgments that are there and all the pain that we create, not only in our lives, but in others' lives. So we got to look, beloveds, about how we can change our own life through changing the law of thinking in ourselves and start thinking better. Practice it. Give time to yourself to do that, because our thoughts affect our welfare, and it often affects others as we determine or think of it. So I would like you to consider this information while we go back next week and do a little bit more finishing up about it. Namaste. So any comments or questions?